Well, hello. Welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. William Jones is an English singer, songwriter, guitarist, and historian. He fronted his own band, Friends, beginning in 1986 for 35 years. Through many lineup changes, the band have released 10 albums and 7 singles. And Friends have been featured on a couple of various artist compilations, as well as their own compilations. In fact, William and Friends first came across my radar when I heard a song off of the various artist collection, The Sound of Leamington Spa, Volume 2. In 2021, William formed the band La Porta Nuova in his hometown in Turin, Italy. The band have issued a couple of 4-track singles and just completed a third. And besides his music career, William also is a bit of a historian. He has a website, WilliamJonesFamilyArchive.com, where he has compiled his family history with particular focus on his great-great-grandfather. I thoroughly enjoy history, and I'm excited to not only hear about my guest's musical heritage, but also to learn a little about his family heritage as well. Well, welcome, William.
Hello, Greg. Greetings from a very hot Turin.
Okay, is it warm there?
It is. It's very warm, yeah, but I like it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's as warm as it is here. We're reaching up, getting close to 100. I think we broke 100 the other day. So
Oh.
it's always hot here in the summertime. You know that. Well,
yeah.
We'll take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
Well, I usually describe myself as Welsh because my family originally comes from Wales. We come from an island in North Wales called Anglesey. And on this island, there's a small village with a very, very long name. And the village is famous for this name. It attracts tourists who come in buses. They get off the bus at the station. They photograph themselves and the sign with the village name. They have a cup of tea and they go away again because there's nothing else to see. It's a lovely place. We lived there until I was about 5 or 6. I went to the village school where some Welsh was spoken. I spoke some very basic Welsh myself. But in 1962, we moved to London. And that was an absolutely wonderful time to be in London because it was the beginnings of Beatlemania.
Right.
And it was an amazing time because even for a small boy, 5 or 6 years old, you knew that something was happening that was different from anything before. The music was just so fresh and so captivating. Coincidentally, we lived just round the corner from Abbey Road Studios, about 5 minutes walk. So some evenings we used to go and join the crowd of people hanging around outside the studio, because at that time, being kind of just getting established, the Beatles were recording mostly in the evenings and at night. So we used to stand around waiting for them. I don't know if it's a trick of the memory, but I've always believed that I saw George Harrison arrive one night. But
Okay.
It was a fairly unrewarding hobby, kind of hanging around outside Abbey Road Studios. So I gave that up.
Okay.
But no, the music was just so attractive.
Yeah.
The harmonies, the singing, there was something quite kind of male and female about the singing. A lot of the songs, like the louder songs like Twist and Shout, had this kind of guttural, throaty sound where the singers were shouting. And then on the other hand, you got this more female falsetto sound. The guitar sounds were incredible. The beat, the rhythm was just great. So as a small boy, you just couldn't resist it. And we were pretty much obsessed with the Beatles.
Well, how about your parents? Were either one of them musically inclined at all?
My parents, no, they weren't. They liked music, but neither of them played any instrument. And I've got no recollection of them kind of singing around the house, although they played records. They both liked some classical music. My father, later on, towards the end of the 60s, early 70s, was a big fan of ABBA. And
Okay.
at the time, because we were into kind of progressive rock and kind of serious pop music, we thought this was a bit sad, and we used to ridicule my father. But years later, he was proved right. He was proved to be ahead of his time, because ABBA now have the reputation of kind of classic songwriters and classic pop.
Right.
So I think my father was
Isn't that,
right after all. But
is,
no, they didn't
yeah.
they didn't do music, but they encouraged me a lot, particularly in practical ways, like buying instruments and paying for lessons and buying music for me.
Okay.
So they were very supportive.
Okay. Was the guitar the first instrument you picked up and learned to play?
It wasn't. In fact, it was the piano.
Okay.
My grandmother's house, in my grandparents' house in Anglesey in North Wales, had a grand piano in the living room, which took up quite a lot of space. So I used to play that. And back in London, we had a small upright piano, and I had lessons in London. So my first instrument was the piano. And then another great thing about that time was that schools, it had a statutory duty to provide music lessons, instrumental lessons. So there was a violin teacher who came to the school, and I learned the violin. There was also a guitar teacher, and I really took to the guitar. So I joined the guitar class there, and I took to the guitar very well. So I was a bit of a kind of prodigy on the guitar. So I was identified for individual private lessons with a guitar teacher, and I got pretty good. This was classical guitar that I was playing. We then, after 6 years in London, we moved up north to a city called Chester, where I had a very, very good guitar teacher, and continued lessons with him. And my ambition at that time was to be a guitarist, a classical guitarist. Although I was very, very good, I wasn't quite good enough to be, up there with the best. And at the same time, I was getting more interested in writing music, writing kind of modern classical music on the guitar, rather than playing other people's music. So in the end, when I think I was 20, I went back to London University, to study music.
Okay.
And I had guitar lessons there, but I specialized in composition and music analysis. There wasn't a lot of pop or kind of jazz or rock music. In fact, there was zero in the course. It was classical and kind of modern, hardcore avant-garde music. So I spent 5 years at London University and became a graduate in music, which in retrospect, kind of connecting the dots backwards, has been really useful for me as a pop musician in terms of writing arrangements for string quartets, choirs. It's helped me a lot.
Right. I would say so. Yeah. Well, backing up just a bit, can you remember the first single or album that you bought?
I do. My other grandfather had lived in the countryside in England. And believe it or not, in the early 60s, you could go to any small town and it would have at least one record shop.
Yeah.
These days, you can go to a big city and not find any record shops, I think. Anyway, we went to the next small town next to his house, and I bought Twist and Shout by the Beatles.
Oh, okay.
It cost, before 1971, we had old-fashioned English currency, and the price I remember was 7 shillings and 6 pence, which today is worth about 35 pence, so incredibly cheap.
Yes.
I loved the record. My grandfather had this really old-fashioned record player, which was an enormous cabinet. The record player was at the top, had 2 enormous speakers, and under the record player were cupboards for storing all your records. So I listened to it a few times, put the record on the window ledge on top of just behind the record player.
Oh no.
Next day I went back and the record was like this. I put it on. I couldn't understand why it was playing in such a woozy way. So I asked my grandfather, and he explained you shouldn't leave a record in the sunlight because it will warp. So I learned my lesson.
I
And
learned I
then
learned my
when we
lesson.
were,
I was going to say I learned my lesson too. I went record shopping during the summer and left a few in the car. And it was a
oh,
hot summer day, and I came back out, and they, like you said, they were gone. They were gone. Go
yeah.
ahead, continue though. What were you going to say?
Well, back in London, on one shopping expedition, my mother, as a treat, bought a Beatles LP for me and my brother. These were, again, in old money, about 30 shillings, which is about £1.50. And I remember I got Hard Day's Night, and my brother got Help.
Yeah.
And we listened to them constantly. It
Yes.
was,
Yes.
yeah. So that was later in my teens. I started buying a lot of records, favorite bands, like Strawbs. I bought everything that came out.
Oh, yes.
Um,
Yeah. I think I have most of their collection too. Yes.
yeah,
Sad to hear of John Hawkins passing.
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, John Hawkins X Renaissance, one of my really favorite bands. It was doubly sad. Yeah.
Yes. And I just spoke with Louis Sinamo, who was
Oh,
in Renaissance
yeah.
too. So I'm making the rounds. That's what I tell them. Because of course Jim McCarty a while back, and then
Yeah.
Louis and
Well, I love Louis' bass playing. He's got a really unusual way of holding the instrument and attacking it.
yes,
And at the same time, considering it was kind of progressive rock, he's got this really funky way of playing, which I love.
yes, he does a
So
unique way. Right.
my favorite version of Renaissance was the second lineup, but I also love the first one with
Yeah.
Keith Relf and his sister and the three people that you mentioned.
Yes, indeed. Well, who were some other musicians and artists that you started to get into as, let's say, as a teenager?
Wow. Well, the list goes on. Um, my first concert was Strawbs,
Oh, wow.
and I got everything that they released. I got really interested in Renaissance when I was at university and got everything of theirs. Listened to it. Particularly loved the sound of the acoustic guitar, which they use instead of electric, often 12-string,
Yes.
which has influenced me a lot. Listened to a lot of Steely Dan.
Okay. All right.
Both ends of their career, the kind of early pop stuff and the later kind of jazz rock. Love their music. Seen them a few times live. The Chameleons. I know you interviewed Mark Burgess, but I
Yes.
saw
Yeah.
them live a few times, and they were incredible.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, they were.
one or two others. I used to like Dolly Mixture, a three-piece all-female pop group. Later, when I was a student in London, I got really interested in the Au Pairs.
Oh, yes.
These days, most of what I listen to is kind of stuff from my past.
Yeah.
It just happens that way. I don't go out of my way to listen to new stuff because when I
I,
hear it, I frequently think, well, I've heard that before. One new band I like a lot, and not particularly new, but current, is a band called Boy Pablo, who come
oh,
from Norway.
okay.
The main person in it is from originally from Chile,
Okay.
but they're very very talented
I'll have
pop
to
group.
check that. I don't know. How do you spell it? Boy Pablo?
It's Boy, yeah, like a young person, and Pablo,
Pablo. Okay. Okay.
yeah, but
I
they're a
will.
band. It's
Yes,
not an individual.
it's not an individual boy named Pablo. Okay, well, I'll have to check that out. I definitely will. Because I do trust your taste because it aligns with mine so much of the bands that I read what that you were into, right up my alley too as well.
So going to see the Strawbs was quite an adventure because I remember I went with a group of friends who liked the band. We got a train to Manchester, and someone's mum or dad picked us up after the show from Manchester and drove us home. The Strawbs were fantastic that night, but one extra kind of bonus of that concert was so often there's a support artist who you don't know and takes you by surprise, and the support artist was an Irish singer-songwriter called Jonathan Kelly, and
Oh, I
he
love his stuff. Yeah.
blew the audience away. He charmed the audience every night of that tour,
Yes.
with his humor, his talking, and just the quality of the songs and his voice. So I was already a big Strawbs fan, so I'd already got their album from that tour. Um, the Monday after the concert, I went straight to the record shop in Chester and bought Jonathan Kelly's new album, which was called Twice Around the Houses.
That's right.
It's a
Yes.
brilliant record.
Yes.
And I became a big fan of his music. He only made 4 albums,
Yes.
and died a couple of years ago.
Yes, he did.
A great musician and absolutely delightful person.
Yes, I have his I think it's his collection or maybe a twofer on a CD, but that one that you mentioned, I have that. You know, another guy, I just love his music. Another one who passed away. You familiar with David McWilliams?
Not no.
Oh, you will love his music. He passed away too early. And he's another Irish singer, David McWilliams. Look him up.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's got some wonderful, wonderful music. And another one that sadly passed, too young, but and never hit it, really big, kind of flew under the radar, unfortunately, like so many. But yeah, he's another really, really nice. His voice and the music and everything. Well, what was your first band before Friends?
There was nothing before Friends.
Okay. All right.
The way it happened, that two things happened that led me to form Friends. I had a very good friend. I was in my first job. I was working in the northeast of England in an arts centre in a town called Stockton-on-Tees, and my job, I was the music officer, was to organise all the music for the arts centre, which was not only concerts, but it was classes and courses. It was lessons, and it was concerts of all type of music, from classical to jazz, folk, world music, and pop music. And I had a good friend, still a very good friend, called Carl Green, who formed a band, and he did some releases on Summer House Records. But he just split up his band because he was sick of playing live. He hated playing live, and he wanted to do something experimental. So he got together a group of people, called it like a project, and he wrote me in to play some unusual instruments. So I played for him on these demos. I played harpsichord and I played viola.
Oh, okay.
And I really enjoyed it. He didn't need a guitarist because he played the guitar. So my role was temporary and very limited, but I enjoyed the experience. And then at the same time, I was putting on a lot of indie pop music in this art centre, which it was a wonderful venue. It's kind of really ideal size for indie pop, like not too big, but you could get a big crowd in there. And I just started to think that the bands I liked, I could be doing that. I would like to be on the stage sometimes instead of behind the mixing desk or kind of organizing everything. So I'd been writing guitar music, really, which guitar parts which could form the basis of songs. They were kind of quite fluid, picky guitar parts. They just needed melodies. So I thought, I've got the basis of some songs. So I developed 5 songs. We did a demo, and then it all went from there. We started playing live. We stopped making demos because I just reckoned it was a waste of time sending cassettes to record companies. Formed Summer House Records for my band and a couple of others, and started to release the music because we were recording it to a quality for the demos that was equal to an official release. Right. So that's how Friends started. The name came a bit later, and I've always regretted the name, but when I started regretting it, it was too late to change it, really.
Okay, yeah, you can't really backtrack because you already got the notoriety and the fans and everything. So it's too,
Exactly. In those
I,
pre-internet days, like 1986,
right,
if you
exactly.
if you'd done a few records and then you suddenly changed your name, it was like starting again. There was no way that you could tell people, because you didn't know where the records had gone, who'd bought them.
That's right.
Didn't have any database, so
Yeah.
we just had to stick with a name. And then, of course, the television program came along in 1984. So we had 8 years before there was this kind of clash of names. And I remember one day someone told me, "Hey, William, you've got your own television program, I see." I said, "What?" And it was Friends. And I really don't believe the TV program has harmed the band at all.
Right.
I think it was just a poor choice of name, but we had to live with it.
Right. Well, what was the lineup when you recorded your first 7-inch? It's getting louder.
Well, it was me singing and playing guitar. There was a second guitarist, bass, drums, keyboards, and trumpet.
Okay.
And when we played live, we used 2 trumpets, which was kind of doubled the problems and doubled the expense, because the trumpet players were notoriously, the ones that we used were pretty inaccurate. So when you've got 2 trumpeters on the stage playing inaccurately, it can get a bit frustrating.
Yes.
But that was the lineup. It was kind of classic. I think we got the idea of the trumpets probably from the sound of the Teardrop Explodes.
Oh, another one of my favorites.
Much.
Another one of my Yes.
We thought we'll put the riffs on trumpet instead of electric guitar.
Right.
And for a while it worked okay.
Yeah. Well, you recorded at Strawberry Studios in Rockport. A lot of big bands. A lot of big bands have recorded there. Yeah.
Big mistake. Big mistake. What happened was a musician whose opinion I respected a lot, I asked him for some advice, and he said, for your first single, he said, go to the most expensive place you can find.
Really?
So we went to Strawberry. And honestly, it was a mistake. Strawberry was too good for us, I would say. We didn't need that kind of quality. And if anything, the band were a bit overawed.
Okay.
Because, this was the place where 10cc had recorded, where Joy Division had recorded. We didn't need that kind of sophistication of studio. We could have gone to somewhere more local, much cheaper and smaller, and spent longer getting the songs right. And at the same time, there was incredible pressure being in Strawberry for just 2 days to get it right first time. Yeah. So we can say we recorded there at least, but
you weren't real happy. You weren't real happy with the results.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, it's a learning curve that you go through, right? Sometimes you have to go through those situations. Well, the band did play live to support the single, and then you mentioned a little bit earlier starting Summer House.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts behind that? Your own label, having your own label.
Well, I thought it was the best way to get our music to other people, instead of endlessly making demos and sending them to record companies, chasing them up, following them up, and record companies saying, no, it's not quite what we're looking for. And then you've just wasted a good quality demo. So part of the reason for Summer House was to promote my own band, but there was my friend Carl Green's band as well, who were one of the first 3 acts on the label. And then there was a really tremendous band who'd played at my venue called 4 Million Telephones, who were looking for a record deal. They'd done an album on their own label, but they were looking for something more than their own label. And they were a really interesting band, very kind of avant-garde, kind of funky pop. But they had an incredible live presence, and people who would not like that type of music normally just loved them.
Yes.
Because they were just so interesting and so dynamic on stage. So we started off with these 3 acts on the label. The first single by Friends, the one that I didn't like too much. Sold about 29 copies straight off, and then got stuck.
Yeah.
Second one, we went to a different studio called Fairview near Hull in North England, and worked for the first time with John Spence, who went on to produce 7 of our albums. And that did a bit better. And then the first album, called Let's Get Away From It All, our drummer, Graham Robinson, had a recording studio.
Yes.
So it made sense to use his studio, since we're using him as a drummer, and he was a very good engineer. And that album, that's when it took off. The first month, I got a sales statement from our distributors, and we'd sold about 1,000 copies. And I thought this was a mistake. The statement must be wrong. So I phoned the distributors and said, "What's happening here? According to you, we've sold about 1,000 copies. This cannot be right." They said, "Yes, it's correct." So I said, "Well, where are they going? Because we're an unknown band."
Right.
They said they're going to Japan. And this was the first time I realized that we had a following.
Audience.
I said, "Why are they going to Japan?" And the distributor said, "Because the Japanese love typically English stuff."
Yeah.
And our music was very, very English. So that was the start of a relationship with Japan. And since then, 7 of our records were licensed by Japanese labels. And the next thing we thought was, well, we must go to Japan to play. But it depends on a promoter organizing a tour. You can't just go to Japan with your guitars and kind of set up somewhere. You need to be invited, and it needs to be organized properly, etc. Finally, in 2011, we got an invitation to go to Japan for a week, and it was an incredible experience.
Right. A dream, kind of a dream come true. Yeah.
It was, yeah, because all these people we'd never met.
Yeah.
Back to 1988, when the first album came out, to 2011, they'd been buying the records, the CDs, and been waiting for us to go there. We used to get letters from Japan. This was before email, saying, "When are you coming to Japan?" And we had to say, "Well, I'm really sorry, but we're not."
Yeah.
When we did, they really turned out in force, and it was it was an eye opener, because we did a warm up gig in London. So shortly before Japan, we played at the Berlin Pop Fest.
Okay.
We were second on the bill before the Pooh Sticks. And to warm up for the Berlin Pop Fest, we did a gig in London. We played to 2 people in London. In Japan, we were playing to 500 or 600 people a night.
Yes.
So figure that one out. I still don't understand it.
I understand that either. Yeah, talk about the Japanese audience. I've heard, different ones that I've talked to that played Japan, how, polite they are, but how enwrapped they are with the music. They will sit there through the sound check and just attentive, listening to that before you even start playing. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, Greg, because we were playing one of the gigs. In fact, 2 of the gigs, because a lot of the people came twice. I remember one night there was a man standing right in front of me, right in front of the stage, with his eyes closed like this. Yeah. And afterwards, I said to the promoter, "We must have been really bad because we put someone to sleep in the audience." He said, "No, he wasn't sleeping. He was focusing, was concentrating on the music."
Right.
And it's true. He was.
Yeah, exactly. I find myself doing that when I saw Mark and the Chameleons. We went to this was 2000. We went to Manchester to see him play, kind of with the Reformed, getting back together, and because we didn't think he would ever come here, to play. And then since then, I've seen him 4 other times here locally, but at that time we thought he'll never come here. So yeah, it was and just kind of when you close your eyes, you just get all wrapped up in the music, and tune out all the other everything and just listen to the music. So I can relate to that. Well,
the Chameleons. I went to I was in Stockton-on-Tees. I went down to Leeds by bus, and I knew that the last bus home was after the end of the concert. So I saw the Chameleons, and I slept on a bench in a park, waiting for the first bus the next morning. But it was worth it because I think they were the best live band I've ever seen.
Yes, I concur. I definitely agree with that. One of my all-time favorite bands from any generation. Well, by moving forward here, talking about the first album, you were a little more happy with the way that one turned out than the single.
I was.
Yeah, the single.
Yeah.
Your second album, 1989's Roads Leading Everywhere, that's the one that I have on CD. The song You'll Never See That Summertime Again was from that Various Artists collection. Sound of Leamington Spa. I've got two of those volumes, Sounds of Leamington Spa. Really good. I picked up on some really good bands from that. You know, really, really nice summary, you know, acoustic, you know, kind of jangly guitar material off of that. So that was on there, and I was happy with it. I also like All Around You Now and Were We Really There? That's another really nice track.
Yeah. All Around You Now is a good example of how we use the trumpets. So they're playing the riffs instead of an electric guitar. And the first song you mentioned, You'll Never See That Summertime Again, it was on another compilation of the Indie Tracks Festival where we played. They asked all the bands for a track. So we were the first track on that compilation. And in fact, we had recorded it again. We did a second version as a single, which was exactly the same, just better played and better recorded. Yeah. So that's the one that appeared on the Indie Tracks compilation.
On that compilation, okay, all right. Well, you were starting to release quite a lot of material, but you weren't really happy again with the third album, Songs Without Tears, were you?
I wasn't. That's probably the least satisfactory for me. It's partly because when we recorded it, I'd left Stockton-on-Tees and I was still using Graham's studio, our drummer, but I was traveling back one day a week. I was basically commuting from my new home in the Midlands, and we never managed to get any kind of momentum going. It was kind of stop, start, stop, start. Also, I didn't like the sound on it so much. So that was the last thing that I produced myself. After that, we went back to John Spence at Fairview in Hull and asked him to produce and engineer, and he did the next 7 albums.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
which I've been happy with all of them.
I was gonna ask you that. So you've been happy with his work. Well, 1992's Bluishness, that was the first one released only on CD.
That's right. Yeah.
It was the advent of the CDs, and at that time, the vinyl was kind of, you know, going by the wayside. But again, today it's had a resurgence, so we all know about that. On the following album, Sundrowned, you got to experiment with the whirly tube. Now, is that the same? I want to ask you, speaking of the Chameleons, is that what they used on Script of the Bridge?
Exactly what they used.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like a child's toy. We bought it from a toy shop, and it's a plastic tube which is hollow, and you spin it around, and it makes this kind of sound a bit like the wind. And the Chameleons, with the Chameleons, I always thought it was a keyboard, but it wasn't. It's called a tune tube.
I did too. You know, I just thought it has that kind of eerie, you know, oral kind of sound to it, you know. But you know, the end of Here Today and the beginning of Monkey Land, you know.
That's right.
So
and at this time, the albums were getting longer. So Bluishness, I think we did 12 songs, Sundrowned 15, folk songs about 17 or 18. So the albums were getting enormous. And some people sometimes said you shouldn't put so many songs on an album. You should make it. It's too long. You make it shorter. And I always said, well, people can stop listening when they've had enough. But I always thought it was good value for money.
You know what? I say that with these interviews. You asked me earlier, how long would this be? Well, some of them are 2 hours or a little bit more. Some of them almost an hour. So I say the same thing. If it's too long for people, you don't have to watch it all in one sitting. You can watch parts, different days or whatever. Or if it's too long, if you have a short attention span, like so many people, you don't have to. It's not for everybody. But we dive in a little deeper. So here, well, talk about folk songs and the overall stripped down acoustic approach to the album.
Well, folk songs, again, it was a very long album, and it's called folk songs, but that's it's like a joke, because the songs are very acoustic mostly, and a lot of them are about people. In other words, folk are people. So it's not folk music. It's just very, very acoustic songs. So we'd done a few very acoustic songs. So we thought this would be a good time to put a lot of them together on one album. So we used string quartets. We used double bass quite a lot. We did a couple of songs where it's just guitar and a bit of percussion. So it was an interesting one, but it wasn't a complete change of direction, because we went back to the full band sound with the next album.
Right. I was going to say, did that kind of confuse the fans a little bit with that album?
I don't know. I do know that we got a very good review in one of the music magazines by someone. The review was given to the reviewer because the magazine thought it was folk music.
Yeah.
And he listened to it and he realized this is not folk music, but he liked it and he reviewed it anyway. The fans, I don't know. We don't get, honestly, at that time, this was 95, we didn't get a lot of feedback. You'd get occasional letters, but it wasn't like social media.
Yes.
So you put out a record, you'd see how it sold, but you wouldn't really know if people thought, well, this is great, this is a fantastic new direction, or, this is a disaster. Just don't know.
Yeah. Well, the album didn't do real well commercially, though.
It didn't.
Song.
No.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about the best of collection. Did you personally handpick the songs that went on there?
Yeah, more or less. Yes, I did. Partly it was songs that were my favorites, or which I thought worked very well, were recorded well. And partly it was from when we got reaction from people, like at concerts, people would say, I particularly liked that song. So if we'd got feedback from people who'd bought the records, then we include, and generally it was the same tracks that people liked. So I always think if most people like them, it's probably a good song.
Yes.
Yeah, it was, again, it's a long album. We put a strange decision. We put "You'll Never See That Summertime Again" at the end. I'm not sure if that was a correct decision now, but anyway, that's where it is. And there's a very nice big booklet, which is the whole history of the band up to that time. But it's only up to about 95. That's best of. Yeah.
We'll talk about playing live. There's an art to that, playing enough of the songs that the fans are comfortable with or know, but then interjecting some new material too. So there's definitely some, an art to doing that, to keeping them interested, the fans.
Yeah. Well, when we went to Japan, we knew that a lot of the fans had been listening to us since the very early days. So we had to create a mix of old stuff, like the really kind of popular, well-known songs that we did, and some newer stuff. And in particular, at that time, we were just releasing a new album called The Zen House, which was licensed to the label of the promoter of the concerts, which was Vinyl Japan. We felt we should include some songs from The Zen House, even if people haven't heard them. So creating a set list when you've just got a limited time. I think in Japan we were given 50 minutes. Sometimes it's a challenge to mix things that people know and like, things that they don't know and you hope they like. But we've always tried to create a balance of old and new.
Right, right. And then you can always hold back the real top favorite songs for the encore, a lot of times. Yeah. Well, 2002's Beautiful You. Do you consider this Friends' best album?
I'm very happy with it. It's not I love the album. If I have to choose a number one favorite, it's not that one. It's a different one. But
Okay.
this was Beautiful You was the first we'd record. We had a gap of about 5 years because the drummer, Martin Parker, who was the other one of the two with me, he moved to Edinburgh and I moved to London. So we were at different ends of the UK. So it was difficult to keep rehearsals going as we had done in the past, where we practice every week. So there was a gap. It took longer to develop that album than any other. So it came out. In fact, we've recorded it 2001, came out in 2002, and it's got some of my favorite songs on it. My absolute favorite album is two after that one. It's called Spangle Land.
Oh, okay.
All which right. It's got one very, very long song which I like. Yeah. It's quite a weird song. It's got some classic pop. It's got for me, it's got everything that I would like to have in an album.
Okay, so I've got all the elements. Well, what are some of the highlights, some of the songs off of that album? Go ahead, and since we're talking about that are your favorites.
The first track on Spangle Land is called Juliet.
Yes.
Which is a lot of our albums, we start with a kind of, we think, classic pop song. Yeah. What else is there? There's quite a kind of the very, very long song, it comes at the end. It's called Turn the Sun on Me. Yeah. The title track, Spangle Land, has got very beautiful guitar sounds. What else? There's a song which is quite acoustic and quite kind of somber, called Give Me Back My Life. So there's quite a range of styles on that album, but all within the overall Friends sound, I would say. Right.
Yeah, I read where I guess in the bio about how you never really wanted to put the word love, in any title, but you've used quite a lot of the English language to skirt using that.
It wasn't a deliberate decision at the beginning. I after we'd done, I don't know, a couple of albums and a couple of singles, I noticed that this word hadn't appeared. So I thought, okay, we can make a thing of this. We can try to say it in different ways. Very recently, I discovered for the first time the music of Al Stewart.
Oh,
a
really?
Singer-songwriter who I've known his name for many, many years, but never heard his music till recently, when quite by chance I saw a video of the Year of the Cat.
Yeah.
And what happened with him? He decided, he did 3 albums which hadn't done very well at the beginning of his career, and he thought, everyone writes about love and relationships and all of that, and he just had a very bad experience and didn't want to do it anymore. So he thought, what can I write about that's different? And he kind of hit on the topic of history, which was a big interest to him. So his 4th album was all about historical topics, and it did better than the first 3 albums put together. So he kind of gave up writing about love, or if he did it in a very interesting and different way, like the song The Year of the Cat, which is about a very strange affair.
Right.
So for me, I don't know if I've kind of fallen into the trap since then. Definitely a lot of the songs are love songs, but I have tried to avoid the L word.
The L word.
Simply because you just fall into cliches like, baby, I love you, and do you love me?
Right.
So
it has been overused. I have to say that over the years it has been. Well, moving forward to the Zen album from 2011, another all acoustic. This one, and has more of an intimate feel. So were you happy with the way that one turned out?
Very happy, yeah. This was, if thinking of folk songs as a more acoustic album, the Zen House was ultra acoustic. So a lot of the songs are just classical guitar and voice. And I was very, very pleased and very proud that I recorded a lot of them live in the studio. So no separation, just recorded it, the guitar and the voice together. You have to get it right. And I was particularly pleased that I got some of them on the first tape. So I felt a bit like a kind of inferior version of Nick Drake, who did that. I mean, he recorded live in the studio, generally got it first time. There are other instruments. There's a string quartet on some songs. There's a bit of percussion. There's some double bass, but it is very, very acoustic. And it was the last album of Friends, so it's like a kind of goodbye.
Yes. I was just looking something up too. I had because you mentioned the string quartet a few times. I did an interview with Ivo Vanderwerf, and he was a member of the Medici String Quartet for over 30 years. And now he's teaching at Rice University in Houston. So a lot of times I'll find these people in my own backyard. Really strange, but
Just talking about the string quartet while we're there. Just connecting the dots back to studying music at university. It was at university that I learned how to write the score for a string quartet. How to arrange the four instruments out of my head. And it was so useful that when we got a string quartet into the studio, these were professional musicians, usually orchestra players. You could put the music in front of them and they could just play it. They could make a couple of suggestions, say, how about doing this here? But there was no need for experimentation. It was all kind of pre-written, which was very satisfying.
Yes, I imagine it would be. They already knew exactly what you wanted, and produced it. Wow. Well, I wanted to say too about your the live recordings that you did in the studio. Mentioning Nick Drake, I like a lot of the live recordings the best. The first take. There's just something about that, the spontaneity of it. And there's a lot to be said about dubbing and second takes and that kind of thing, but sometimes it can be too overdone, too produced, too much. So I like that generally, the live sound. Well, when and why did you move to Italy?
Good question. Well, I told you about a job I was doing in an arts centre in the north of England. So my first job, I was working in arts management and marketing, and I started to specialize more in marketing. So after a long and winding career, I ended up as head of marketing at a very big arts centre in London called the Barbican, which was an enormous job. After that, I formed a company which was a marketing consultancy working in the arts and the charity sector, which I did for 6 years. And in the end, I wanted to change my life, and in particular, I wanted to work abroad. And in particular, I fancied working in Italy. And the first job I was offered, I trained for a year to teach English as a foreign language.
Okay.
And the first job I was offered was in Turin as an English teacher. So I went expecting to go for a year or maybe two. 13 years later, I'm still here because I'm happy here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what was it that attracted you to Italy to begin with?
Well, I'd come to Italy when I was 20. In fact, I used to come to Italy every summer. And one summer, I'd spent a year at home after school, before university, teaching myself Italian. So I got a job working in a wine company for the summer in Tuscany. So I'd already got some kind of history with Italy. So I used to go back every summer for about 5 years. And when I thought of a place to live, I didn't know Turin. So I didn't know Turin at all, in fact. So I've been really surprised living here. And the reason I'm still here is because it's a beautiful environment. It's a nice climate, nice people. It's just a good place to live. And there's nothing for me now in England. I don't have a house there. I've got brothers and sister in England, but there's nothing to draw me back to the UK.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, because I ask people that expatriate and that kind of thing. Can you get by there without speaking Italian? Could you get by?
I do speak Italian.
Well, yeah, I know you do, but let's say if you didn't, could you get
Oh,
by? Could you,
okay.
do enough people speak English? Let's put it that way.
It would be difficult. No, enough
Okay.
people don't speak English.
Okay.
It's quite random when you hit upon someone, for example, in the shop, whether
Yeah.
they speak English or not, or if you're going to visit a doctor,
Okay.
you just can't predict it.
Yeah.
So I think if you plan to stay in Italy for a short while, you could survive.
Yeah.
But if you plan to make it your home, you need
Yeah.
to learn the language really, because
Right.
you miss so much if you can't speak the language. You miss so much of the culture and the interaction with people.
Yeah.
So I think you really need it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it depends on what part that you live in. If you live in a larger city, they speak English, a lot more than some of the
That's
smaller. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
So
true.
yeah,
Yeah,
I like to ask that question. Well,
sure.
except you said nice climate, except for today, right?
No, today July in Turin is really, really hot every year, and I like it. I look forward to it.
Okay. Well, you were trying to, I guess when you first moved there, trying to keep friends afloat, but I guess
Yeah,
with the distance and other factors, it wasn't to be.
that's right. When I made the decision to move, I talked to the band, and we decided that we'd try to keep going by having more occasional but intensive rehearsals, particularly in the Christmas period and in the summer. But the problem was, when I came over to England on holiday at Christmas in the summer, members of the band were going away on holiday at exactly the same time. So it was really difficult to find a block of time when we could work together intensively on the song. So what generally happened was we'd get a couple of days in the summer, work on some new songs. By Christmas, they were generally forgotten.
Oh, right.
Okay, you can record a rehearsal, but it's not so good, and you can't get every detail. And also, you're not developing the songs really, which I used to enjoy doing week by week. So it was really difficult to keep it going, and we kept trying. We tried for 10 years to keep it going. People say, well, this is the 21st century, you can do it all remotely. But honestly, Greg, I find it really boring sending files to and
Yeah.
fro and
Yeah.
changing them a little bit and sending them back, and someone saying, oh, I spent 3 hours working out this part.
Right.
Why don't you like it?
Yeah.
So what I like in developing songs is to be in the same room as three
Right.
or four people
Right.
and hearing it develop and
Right.
interacting. And
Yeah.
if you have a problem with something in a song, it's 5 minutes to fix it. It's not 3 hours recording and making files and transferring them and blah blah blah.
Right.
So I was getting really frustrated. So after 10 years, I felt I'm no further ahead with the next album than I was 10 years ago. Let's be honest. Let's stop it. I'll do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. I hear that sentiment frequently about the missing that organicness, of being in the same room and the chemistry of recording together. You miss that when you're sending files and you're in different places. Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I get that. Well, then you formed La Porta Nuova. How did you bring in the members? Had they all heard of your material, friends?
They hadn't. The thing about the music scene in Turin, I guess most parts of Italy, is there's a very big tribute band scene. So one of my reasons for hesitating about forming an Italian band was I'd seen a lot of really, really good musicians playing in cover bands, tribute bands. And I thought these people will just not get the English indie pop concept. They can play, but can they play simply? Can they play cleanly? And can they respond to direction? Can they invent their own parts also? So I was very hesitant to approach Italian musicians to play my music. In the end, when I finished Friends, I just hit upon three musicians who I knew and who knew each other. They'd played together a lot. The drummer, Alex Bonacci, runs a music school, and all of the musicians in my band teach in the music school, as well as being full-time pro musicians. So they're all really, really high quality musicians. So I approached Alex and said, can you put these people together for me? Can we meet and talk about it? So we met. There was Alex on drums, there's Ivano Groarin on guitar, there's Francesco Vecchia on bass, and there are a couple of other people that we use as and when we need them. Particularly, there's a really brilliant keyboard player called Paolo Gambino and a brilliant female singer called Alessandra Turi. So we started working together and we enjoyed it. And the musicians, I was completely wrong. They adapted to English indie pop really well, and they had some really good kind of indie ideas about the songs. So they can play anything, but they've really contributed a lot to the music. So I'm very lucky to be working with them. And at the same time, I'd also thought we'll never manage to replace John Spence of Fairview as a producer, because he was just a great engineer and a great producer. But we found the studio we use in Turin is called Imagina, and the owner and the engineer and producer there is called Alessandro Ciola, and he's produced he's engineered all of our singles. He's produced the second and the third, and he's brilliant. So after a lot of hesitation, I found I'd got what I needed right in front of me, and it fell into my lap.
Well, were the other members, were they familiar with the English indie pop? Were any of them fans?
Yeah, they'd heard things. They'd heard some of the better known indie pop things like The Cure, right, like the kind of the bigger names from indie pop. But the style is often similar to our style. Yeah. They know, they appreciate it's not heavy rock. Yeah. It's not kind of jazz funk. The problem with a lot of great musicians is that they overplay. They do too much when often you want simplicity. So my colleagues in La Porta Nuova, they can do simplicity when it's needed. They can do complexity when it's needed, and they can be more extreme when it's needed. Like on the new single, there's some more extreme stuff.
Okay, okay. Well, speaking of indie pop in other countries, did you see my interview recent with Martin Nelte of Brideshead?
I didn't. I've seen a few interviews. I've seen Mark Burgess.
Right,
I've
right,
seen Jim McCarty of Renaissance. I've seen Rod
right.
Coombs of the Strawbs, and I've seen Malcolm Ross because I used to love Orange Juice, but I haven't seen Martin Nelson. No.
Yeah, it's recent, and German indie pop,
Yeah.
Brideshead, and he was on board, to do that, and I think it turned out well. I think it turned out well, and again, they speak the same language. I mean, not vocally, not speaking, but the music is the same, and
Yeah.
they've done a lot of, really summery indie pop type music too. So uh, it was a nice connection there to make.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you too about the 4-track singles. So far,
Mm.
you've released two, but then you just when did the third one come out? When was it released?
Okay. Well, when I started La Porta Nuova, by the way, the name, it means the new door,
The new door.
like
Yes.
the door behind you. I can
Right.
see on the screen. But La Porta has maybe a second meaning of like a gateway or yeah, a gateway or a can't think of the word, like an opportunity.
Yeah. Yes.
So I thought for me, it is exactly that. Also, there's another connection, which is that one of the principal train stations in Turin is called Porta Nuova,
Oh,
without
right.
la. So it's kind of there's a local reference as well.
Okay.
Okay, so the singles, we released the first one, Elisa, 2 years ago. So the plan with the band was, instead of doing albums, we'd do 4-track single, digital only, once a year, and that's working out quite well. 4 tracks isn't too much. It's not like doing a Friends album with 15 or 16 songs. We
Right.
can do 4 tracks in 3 days, and then the same time for mixing. Second single was Glorious Day, and that was a very exciting process because the title track, I had the feeling that the words and the type of music had a slightly gospely feel. And they were quite spiritual lyrics, and the sound was quite gospelly. And I thought, what we need here is a gospel choir.
Okay. Right.
Everyone said, no, don't do that, don't do that. And then I thought, let's get the best in the world. So I approached the London Community Gospel Choir, and a lot of people would say they're the best in the world. People who wouldn't say that would say they're the best outside New York, definitely. And I met them, talked about what I needed for the song, and their musical director did an arrangement. We identified an incredible soloist from the choir called Annie Bowen, who does the solo part. So the end of that song is 3 minutes of unaccompanied gospel choir, which is really,
Yes.
really emotional, I think. Yeah. The third single we recorded last weekend, and we're mixing it in early September, and it will be out later in September.
Okay.
But having promised myself I'd never touch vinyl or CDs again, all of these things will be digital. Look what we've gone and done.
There you go. Yeah,
This
a nice
is double album of the 2 singles. And it's a double album because some of the songs are quite long. Yeah. So some of them go over the 22 minutes that people recommend for one side of vinyl. So this is 2 records and a nice inlay
open that up.
lyrics and
And it's got
everything.
the lyrics in there too. Wow.
So, and it's got a beautiful feel to it and a very nice connection. When we did the first single, It's Getting Louder, it was cut. That cutting is the process which transforms the tape or the file onto vinyl before it's pressed, before all the copies are pressed. And the first single was pressed in 1986 by a very cool young man called Jeff Pesh. at a cutting room in London called Tape One. And I thought I was also quite a cool young man. So we got on fine. Jeff went up and up in the mastering business and ended up at Abbey Road Studios, where he's one of the chief mastering engineers. So when we needed this album cut, the actual lacquers making,
Yeah.
I approached Abbey Road and we worked with Jeff Pesh.
Oh.
So from 1986 to 2004, we had no contact, but he remembered and I remembered. So it was a very nice experience. It was a great experience, not so much for Abbey Road, although it was wonderful being in that place, but it was because of Jeff and the history of the band.
Right. Kind of a full circle kind of moment.
You know? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Going back to the origin.
Go
ahead.
And the third single, which we recorded last weekend, it's got, I think people who know our music, when they listen to the songs 1 and 4 off the EP, will get a big surprise. Songs 2 and 3 are kind of within our style. I mean, there are little differences, but they're recognizably us. First and fourth songs, there are some surprises. I'm not going to spoil it now, but I think for me, good surprises.
Yes. Well, that'll have people anxious for September. Yeah.
Well, the album will be released and available on the 5th of August. Okay. It's only available from Summerhouse Records, so it's not on Amazon, it's not in any shops, it's only mail order from the band. And the third single, which will be called Road to Gold, will be out in September. And the title Road to Gold is a reference back to my great-great-grandfather, who was a farmer in the place where I grew up, Anglesey, North Wales. And in 1852, he sailed to Australia to find gold. And 3 years later, he came back with enough gold to buy his own farm. So the song Road to Gold, it's not specifically about him, but it's about prospecting for gold.
Right. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Where did you find the information when you started doing the research? And was it pretty well documented about your great-great-grandfather?
Yeah. Well, all the credit really goes to my father, who died in 1994. But when he retired, his big hobby was archiving everything from the family history. So the man who sailed to Australia I inherited his name. He was another William Jones. He wrote a diary of the voyage every day, and he left numerous letters. So my father catalogued everything, typed it on an old-fashioned typewriter, transcribed it into a correct version because William Jones's English wasn't perfect. So my father left behind the originals, like the original diaries and the letters, a typed version, literally what the old man wrote, and then a corrected version. So what I did, I took everything, this enormous kind of vault of material that my father left. I created a website which is called WilliamJonesFamilyArchive.com. William Jones isn't me, it's him, the old man from 1852. And I built the website, and I keep adding to the website and generally maintain it. So it's a really interesting historical archive of a farming family in Wales in the 1850s and after.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who are like myself, really interested in history, that's fascinating. I've had a look around there, and I like some of the pictures I've seen, and and how it's broken down into different time periods and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's well done. So again,
the family, that if we've got records of the family back to the 1700s, so it's pretty comprehensive. And the next generation after the old man, we've got a lot of information, and then the next generation is my grandfather, who I knew quite well.
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, it's like my father. Although I'm not retired, it's going to be a never-ending project,
Right.
because I think there's so much stuff I will never complete it.
It'll be an ongoing, like you said, project, compiling and putting that information on there. But yeah,
Yeah,
for those who are interested, check that website out again. Tell us the name again of the website.
yeah. It's William Jones.
Mhm.
That's me and the
Yeah.
old man. Familyarchive.com.
.com. Yes. So hope some people will go check that out too. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope.
I enjoy that. I enjoy that. Well, William, anything that you would like to mention or plug or refer and uh, kind of coming to a close here that you would like to bring up?
Um,
Or
no, I think I've talked about everything
yeah. What
that's
else? What
relevant.
else? What else keeps you busy? Like you have a
I
lot of
have
extra time.
well, as well as the Family Archive website, I have a blog.
Uh-huh.
And the blog, the topics of the blog are quite varied. There's a lot about music. There's a lot about football. There's a bit about living in Italy. So it's 4 or 5 topics which interest me. The blog is called FromTheSummerHouse.com.
Okay.
From the Summer House. Summer House is the record label. The reason it's called From the Summer House, it suggests it's away from the record label. So it's separate. It's not about Summer House Records. So I love writing the blog. I do it mostly during the holidays, summer and Christmas. But there are a lot of it is intended to be funny. So we've done I think, quite a funny analysis of the words of Reward by Teardrop Explodes, which I have to say are complete nonsense. So I've just dissected them, and it makes me laugh anyway, and a few other people.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, that sounds very.
There's a whole section about a football club that I used to follow in England.
Uh-huh.
This was a football club in the bottom league, and in the 90s, I was quite obsessive. I used to go to every game, home and away, traveling huge distances around the UK, following this football club. So it's mostly the section about the football club. It's like a kind of diary of misery, because bottom division, that it means that they were generally losing.
Losing. I saw a documentary. I guess it's been a few years old, but it was recently. I saw it. Was it Amazon? About called 99, the one about Manchester United
Oh yeah,
in 1999. Yeah, that was it. The World Cup that they won. I forget. They
I think
won.
it was the European. Yeah, it
Or
was the Champions League in Europe. Yeah,
yes, Europe. So and everything leading up to that. So
yeah.
very fascinating, very interesting material. Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, trying to think of. I guess we pretty much covered it.
Yeah,
Thank you, William, for taking time out to do this,
been a pleasure.
and sharing and going back in the time machine a little bit and taking that back to the future, back to the past, actually. Yeah, and all righty. Well, I will once I get this. It's usually about a week. I'll do
Okay,
these on the weekend, and then the following weekend, any editing, and then I'll post it, and then I'll also send you the link too.
great.
So so
Well,
you can post it.
we've got a newsletter going out from Summer House Records
Right,
in
right.
early August, and that goes to, I think you're on the list for the newsletter, but it
Okay,
goes to a few hundred people. So
okay.
I imagine, like, quite a few people will click the link to this
Oh,
interview.
yes, I hope so. I hope so. And it's always fun to read the comments. It's what I enjoy. So
Yeah,
and you might find people from the past, from your past, somebody you never knew was a fan, or talking about some interesting moment, or when they saw you live, or the first time they bought one of the records, what have you, it's just really interesting, hearing those
yeah.
kind of stuff. All right, well,
Thank you.
again, you're welcome, and I've enjoyed it. I always enjoy hearing stories and recollections. So press on, keep doing what you're doing. All the best to you, William.
Thank you.
And we'll get you this copy as soon as I can. And yeah, do keep me posted. You said the letter and everything, but newsletter, and keep in touch.
Will do.
All right.
Thanks.
All the best. All the best,
Okay.
William. All right. Bye for now.
Bye now.
All right.